Alright, so example 1 for chapter 6.6, identify following parallelograms are a rhombus, rectangle, or a square. And they've given us some specific criteria in each one. We need to look at that criteria to establish what exactly they are. So, if you recall the properties of these things, the first one, the diagonals are the same length. Alright, and that's a property of both a square and a rectangle. Okay? But a square requires that these are right angles in the middle, and these aren't marked as right angles. So I can't be guaranteed it's a square, but I know for a fact it must be a rectangle. So if all I know is the diagonals are the same length, then it's going to be a rectangle. You always go with the least specific thing. So rectangle is less specific than a square. A rhombus is less specific than a square also. So you can only go square if it's a square, otherwise it's just a rhombus or just a rectangle, basically, is what you're looking at in these. So again, in order to be a square, the inner angles would have to be marked as right angles. They aren't, so we have to assume it's only a rectangle. The second one, we have angle bisectors. All right? Both a rhombus and a square bisect angles. A rectangle does not bisect angles. So as soon as I say angle bisector, I know it's not a rectangle. It must be a rhombus or a square. Again, to be a square, I have to have right angles in the corners, which is not marked that way. So again, I have to go with the less specific one, which is rhombus. All right. The third one. The two diagonals intersect at a right angle. Now, the two figures of these three that intersect at right angles in the middle are either square or rhombus. Okay, again, a rectangle does not intersect at right angles with the diagonals. So I know for a fact this is not a rectangle, so again, it's either a square or a rhombus. All I know is that's the right angle. In order to be a rhombus, or sorry, a square, I have to have either right angles in the corners or the diagonals themselves have to be marked as congruent to each other. There's no guarantees. These can be different lengths, or the sides, of course, are the same because squares and rhombus have all sides the same. But again, there's nothing that tells me these are right angles in the corners again, so this must be just a rhombus. Moving right along, the next one over. This time we do have the right angle in the middle, so again, it's either a rhombus or a square. But now, this is marked congruent to this, and this congruent to this. They're all marked with the same number of marks, which means that this diagonal is the same length as that diagonal. So that is a property of a square. So if the diagonals are equal, we at least have a rectangle. That means all the angles are right angles. And again, once we know all the angles are right angles, then it's either a rhombus or a square. It must be a square. And finally, we have angle bisectors. Again, angle bisectors imply either a rhombus or a square. Okay, rectangles do not have angle bisectors in the corners. So since this is an angle bisector, it gets us to rhombus or square. And once again, these pieces are the same as these pieces. Both diagonals have the same length, making the out four angles all right angles to each other. So this must be a square also. So the main idea of this problem is there will be some identification maybe in the homework where you have to identify what this is. But the bigger issue is, up till now they've said this figure is a rectangle, this figure is a square, this figure is a rhombus. Now they might just say, here's a figure that looks like this, and you know it's a rhombus based on how it's marked, but they didn't tell you it's a rhombus. So you have to maybe determine from a figure what kind of figure it is based on any criteria that's in there, and then use that criteria to lead you to some other knowledge or determining something in the problem. So you're kind of responsible for knowing what type of shape it is based on how it's marked up, basically is what I'm saying. So make sure that as you're looking through these problems, if they don't tell you this object is this type of quadrilateral, see if there's evidence in the quadrilateral to lead you to it must be this kind of quadrilateral, so then I can do this other thing with it.